I'm sitting here today with my very, very dear friend and colleague, Stacey Mastrian. Stacey is the latest in a long line of friends and colleagues whose arm I have twisted, I hope gently, into learning some music that was not in her repertoire, but for the upcoming concert of the Seattle Philharmonic, we're presenting not one, but two virtually unknown pieces for voice and orchestra. One by a composer with whom you're all familiar, Jan Sibelius. The other, Grace Williams, a great composer from Wales, who was a student of Ralph Vaughan Williams, no relation. So, Stacey, I'm going to turn it over to you so our audience can get to know you a little bit. Tell me about your experience with these two works and what it's been like learning them, and your first impressions and your most recent impressions. Go for it.
Well, when you sent me the recording of L'Uomo Notar, the Sibelius piece, I reacted like, yes, immediately, we have to do this. And I have to say, there was maybe a little bit more reticence at first with the Grace Williams because of the complexities and but they both have just beautiful texts about nature and creation and just these wonderful harmonies and swells and inner relationships that are chromatic, and I've loved working on both of them.
Goody. Sibelius described this piece as a symphonic poem that happens to have voice. Outside of the symphonies, he's best known for some of his symphonic poems like En Saga and the Kalevala legends. This one has gotten pretty short shrift, and I didn't want to mention this in case you hadn't read it yet, but I read that one of the things that mitigates against performances is that it's considered horrendously difficult by singers. And of course, I'm only telling you this now, a couple of weeks before the performance. How would you rate it in terms of some of the other works that you've learned and performed, in terms of difficulty?
Well, I've performed some pretty crazy things. However, I feel like it's really easy to sing from the standpoint of the vocal line itself. It's very gracious and just flows, but because some of those harmonies are so close, and because it plays between minor second, major second, it just has taken careful work, let's say, thoughtful work, but it's one of the most favorite things that I have sung, I have to say. Yeah.
We're going to be giving you a little bit of a preview via some snippets of the Sibelius piece, but I just wanted to say one thing about the Grace Williams work. You're going to have to come to the concert if you want to hear that one. Something that I'm a big fan of the conductor Antal Dorati, and I have his memoirs, which is a great autobiography. If you want to read the most fun memoir by a classical musician, Notes from 7 Decades by Antal Dorati. Anyway, he said one of the best pieces he ever got about conducting Bruckner is conduct it as if you're making it up on the spot. And I found with Grace Williams's piece that she's very, very careful to do, I want it a little faster here, I want it a little more flowing here, now 2 bars of slowing down, now back to tempo. And you cannot calculate it. I had to study it to the point where it seemed like, I think I'll just slow down here, where it seemed like it was the most natural thing in the world to stretch it like a piece of taffy. We haven't had our first orchestra rehearsal yet, but is that your experience, your feeling about it too, or do you have a more regimented view of the various shifts and changes?
No, I agree with you, and I think I mentioned this to you, that I have this sense that the dandelion, after it starts to turn gray, it has all those little bits, right? And it's very complex, but then you could just, right? And then it kind of goes. So, yeah.
Well, we're now going to, we've prepared 3 little excerpts from the Sibelius piece that will give you 3 glimpses of the sound world. The piano is a poor substitute for tremolo strings. That, of course, is one of Sibelius's favorite techniques. And that's how the piece opens in the first excerpt you'll hear. So please imagine that I'm an entire string section playing very soft at the tip of my bow.
Once there was a maiden, daughter of the ether, a beautiful nature spirit, but she was discontented, always dwelling alone in the vastness of space. The maiden comes to earth, and there is water, but she is sad, and she says, "Oh, wretched days, better had I remained a maid of the ether." And she calls to Ukko, the supreme god, and calls upon him for help. Shall I nest upon the wind, dwelling on the waves? The wind shall overturn, the waves taking my dwelling.
There is a thread running through this concert that I honestly did not think of when I was assembling the various components of the program. We're starting with the overture to Mozart's opera Don Giovanni. Mozart was Tchaikovsky's favorite composer, and we're ending the concert with Tchaikovsky's Symphony No. 2. Tchaikovsky was a major influence on the young Jan Sibelius. And a lot of people have said that Sibelius's first two symphonies probably wouldn't be the works they are had he, Sibelius, not been influenced by Tchaikovsky. Sibelius was the favorite composer of Ralph Vaughan Williams, who was the teacher of Grace Williams, whose vocal work Fairest of Stars is also going to feature in this concert. So we have a bunch of wonderful connections between these composers and which ones they liked and were influenced by. so it goes. And these are the kinds of things that you sometimes don't realize until you look at what you've assembled and go, oh my gosh, did I do that? Tchaikovsky's Second Symphony is what I will lovingly call a kind of a mashup. It's a work that is as much original Tchaikovsky as it is Ukrainian folk tunes. He loved folk music. He particularly loved the folk tunes of Ukraine. And so he decided he was going to do a symphony using these folk tunes as an impetus. Not coincidentally, this was the one work that the heavy-duty nationalist Russian composers, Rimsky-Korsakov, Mussorgsky, Borodin, etc., this was the one work of Tchaikovsky that they really loved. It's like, now he's writing music of the people. He's putting aside his beloved German models for once. So on this work, they heaped a lot of praise. In the first movement, Tchaikovsky makes beautiful use of a Ukrainian folk tune, Down by the Volga. It's first stated by a lone solo horn and then taken up by a solo bassoon. You're going to hear these solos beautifully played by, respectively, Matthew Perry and Samantha Epp, our principal horn, our principal bassoonist. So this is how Tchaikovsky sets the stage for this very folk-influenced symphony. There follows not a slow movement per se, but it's a rather sad, melancholy, wistful march, in which Tchaikovsky starts out with a tune of his own over soft timpani beats. And a little while later, for a contrasting section, he brings in a beautiful Ukrainian folk song, Spin, O My Spinner. The third movement is a very Mendelssohnian scherzo, and the last movement looks ahead to the finale of the Fourth Symphony. It looks ahead to the finale of the Serenade for Strings, where he takes one little chunk of melody and goes all to town with it. It's a Ukrainian folk song called The Crane. And that little 4-bar chunk is the material upon which he builds an extraordinary finale, which concludes with the greatest tam-tam stroke in the entire orchestral literature.